Good afternoon and welcome, I guess, to an episode of the CFB Graphs podcast. That's way more formal than I wanted this to be. I love that we've got Clark, our guest, drawing up some plays, getting some good stuff in the background there. I'm Parker Fleming, you know me from Twitter at Stats of War. I can't imagine there's another way you found this video than knowing me on Twitter at Stats of War. And I am just trying to have more smart football conversations with smart football people. And who better to bring in today to do that than my friend Clark Brooks, the SEC Statcat. He of insane detailed charting and stats for all SEC schools. He is with On3 as well, doing some great work with the impact stuff and the impact players. And as he's finishing up those plays, he and I today are going to do a little bit of SEC stock market for quarterbacks, just talking about who are we buying, who are we selling. I'm going to look at some kind of dumb stats, and Clark's going to bring us some smart stats, and we're just going to talk about those and kind of figure out who's real, who's not real, what are we concerned about as we're really turning the corner into the home stretch of the season. Not doing anything formal on this channel too much. Jamie and I are talking about games on Thursdays. If you've been, tuning into that, it's been a lot of fun, but make sure you like and subscribe, all that stuff. I'm going to try to do a little bit more content on this as well. Clark, we've got the plays up on the whiteboard. We've got you here. How are you, my friend?
I am doing good, Parker. Just have one more game to chart. I love when these guys have we have 5 teams off in the SEC. That usually means, a pretty simple week for me. Even with my On3 duties, I'm mostly done charting by Wednesday. So I get 2 days off, which is a very rare thing because the next couple of weeks, it looks like I'm going to be working nonstop. So very good about that. I'm really pleased to see some of these trends try and materialize across the season. Some, because you have some idea how things are going in the summer when you're just dilly-dallying, trying to, kill some time in between the games. But now that we're almost to the halfway point, really interested to see how some things broke, both schematically and with some of these ideas that we had some, with some developments on the field, which we're about to talk about, of course.
And not to mention that things change. We're at the point in the season where we can see teams start to try to do stuff and realize, hey, this isn't working, or this is working, and then adjust their game plan as well. Clark, very brief talking, just super high levels, because we could do a whole podcast, and I think we have in the past, about your charting process. But for people who aren't familiar with your work, you are going through starting on Saturday, and it takes you till Wednesday or Thursday most weeks, and you're charting every quarterback play. Can you give us kind of an overview of how you do that and what you look for?
Yeah. So context is key. I mean, the basic box score stats just don't tell you how someone operates, who is gifted play actions, who is gifted RPOs, who's playing behind a crap offensive line, who is just living on a wing and a prayer, for lack of a better term. So just going in and charting every snap, it gives you a much better idea and indication of a passer's floor, his upside, and how his environment is helping him execute some certain things. So like I was telling you in the pregame, I just got done looking at Tennessee, and of course the veer and shoot is thought of as a cheat code offense, but things are looking a little rocky down there on Rocky Top the last couple of games, trying to move the ball. And it's like I've told my bosses, if they cannot run the ball, that scheme is much, much more mortal. And of course, that is something they have struggled at doing consistently the last few games.
Yeah, absolutely. Clark, I can think of no better place to start than for Tennessee there, as we'll do our little stock market, walking through, talking about if we're buying or selling a quarterback's performance so far, what are our concerns. So let's go ahead and start with Nico at Tennessee. The ascendant 5-star, knew he was going to be the guy, kind of coming into his moment. He's looked fun at times this season. He's looked confused, I think is a fair thing to say at times this season. 66.7% completion percentage, 1,050 yards ranks him, 8th in the SEC so far this season, 9 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions on an average depth of target of 10.3. Those are kind of the box score stats. Clark, which direction is Nico's stock trending, accounting for the fact that he is a first-year starter, and that he's played some tough defenses? What are you kind of seeing in Nico's game?
I mean, I would say it's a buy low situation if there ever was one. He's clear talent. I mean, just think of that last laser throw he made to Dante Thornton in that Arkansas game. That's 40 yards downfield, rolling left on a rope. An extended play. He made Landon Jackson, who Mel Kiper likes a lot more than I am. I think he's a little bit more of a stiff. But again, he's a 6'7", obviously a game-changing type of defensive end. Almost has him for a sack. Reverse Romo's, as I like to say, little backwards pirouette to the left. throws and chase. I mean, you can't find that with every type of quarterback. So I think the scheme is just doing him a little bit of a disservice because when you're looking at the adversity, it has been there. When you're looking at him in true passing situations, it leaves a little bit to be desired. Sure, he did get that long completion, but when you're just looking at him in structure, of course, that veer and shoot tries to hide their quarterbacks as well as anyone in the country. So it's a high play action rate, lots of screens and RPOs. Well, less than 20 inside the pocket, true dropbacks without play actions when not pressured so far this season from Nico Iamaleava. So that's just not a lot. And when you're looking at them specifically, you want to see more. You just want to see more there. But because of his talent, his true athleticism, I just think the scheme is holding him back. But if he was in I wouldn't say any other place, but let's say any other top 15 offense, I think there's no stragglers in there. I think he would be a person who would elevate that unit's floor as well as maximize their ceiling just because of how he's able to fling the ball around very effortlessly. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, like one of his, I think it was against North Carolina State, that dart over the middle, that's just something you don't really see a whole lot in the veer and shoot scheme. It's a lot of stuff outside the numbers, a lot of all hitches, tunnel screens, bubble screens. While
I thought about that one about the Chris Brazel one. It's like the out on the second to last drive where they ended up punting or whatever, and he threw like a 15-yard out. It was beautiful, but it was across the field. It was like a 35-yard throw when all was said and done because the splits are so wide and he's out there. So like you can obviously see the talent is there, and I like what you're saying about. It's not necessarily that it's hampering him so much as like he's already pressing on the limits of the veer and shoot and what the veer and shoot's supposed to do for quarterbacks. And I wonder to what extent they can adapt for two reasons. And I want your opinion on this. One, to make the offense more efficient. Like he can do more. So can they match him to do more? Two, his development long-term as a passer, if he's constantly, hitting the limits of what is a quarterback's coach and offensive coordinator asking him to do, is that going to hamper his potential long-term because he's not getting those reps kind of doing those extra human things that I think he's capable of?
Yeah. I mean, I hate to just throw the entire scheme under the bus, but we have yet to really see a super spread quarterback go to the next level and just like, oh, he's got it. Even Jaden Daniels, well, he said he played in a spreadish scheme. Air raid routes. Everyone runs cross. Everyone runs stick. Everyone runs all verts. These are just things that Tennessee doesn't like to feature a whole lot. It's vertical choice. So that's an extra beat you have to hold on the ball where you're reading the defense and waiting for your receiver to read the secondary as opposed to just having a predetermined route, and you can diagnose it quickly. And when you don't have the best offensive line, it can really throw an extra wrench into things. So I do give Josh Heupel some credit that they are trying to do more, I would say, bankable concepts, but still, just because of how it's so reliant on those vertical choice reads and everything like that, it just puts more onus on the receivers to do the heavy lifting. And of course, when you have a Jalen Hyatt and you can run those wheelie switches all day long and no one can cover it, and all you have to do is hit him in stride, well, gosh, it's really easy to put up a whole lot of numbers. But year 4 of the Heupel experience in Tennessee, so there's a little bit more tendency on tape, and I don't think it's an accident that a good, not great defense was able to slow them down with some preparation.
Yeah,
I got to see more standardized stuff from him because long term, if he's going to try and make it to the next level, I'm not so certain his mentality, his vision, his ability to diagnose coverages and play fast in rhythm will be up to speed to everyone else around, like some other of his peers, I should say, because we know we were both Joe Milton fans last year. He also was a very toolsy quarterback, but again, just some aspects of this offense just is a little bit to be desired because of that. They just don't play always to the strength of the guys back there. I mean, Nico is definitely a mobile guy, but it's not like they consistently want to move him outside the pocket. It's not like they want to consistently use his legs in designed situations. I was actually looking at Nico and Hendon Hooker. Each of them had over 40 designed carries as their years as starters. Nico is training to be well below that. And if they can't take care of business with their inside run stuff, as we've seen the last couple of games, it's just all the more easier to stop. So I just don't think he's being put in the best situations, despite that being a quote-unquote cheat code offense, like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and I like your sentiment about buy low, and we'll wrap up on Nico and move here after this. But I do think that two plays kind of stick out of my mind at the end of the game. I was worried for Arkansas giving the ball back to Nico. I think that was, it worked out for him, so it's hard to argue. But also, I was like, man, I don't necessarily want that to be the case, and bring this down to one drive. But you saw that cross at the end. Nico had him open and just hit him a little bit behind. If he hits that in stride, I'm inclined to believe that's a touchdown or at least a different end of game scenario. And then you see the inexperience on the final play where he rolls to his right, holds onto the ball a little too long, doesn't have the situational awareness to get them one more play, and the balls end up losing. I don't think that we should over-index on those. I think those are tolerable inexperience that we're going to see out of Nico. And I am certainly more worried about, it's not innovation from Tennessee that I want to see. It's like more normal stuff. Like, okay, yes, you can do this like basketball and grass offense. Can you guys run some more concepts that potentially let Nico flex his skill set and increase your efficiency as well? We'll see if they can do that. Let's go ahead and you go ahead on that. Yeah.
They run a very similar scheme. And obviously they had a very easy start to the season, but they were just playing routes on air, doing basic super spread stuff, insert with all hitches, pitch and catch. If there's numbers in the box, well, you're just going to take a one-on-one matchup to a 5-yard curl. And if they play too far to the perimeter, we're just going to gash them inside. And it's really how all simple it has to be. But because of how the offensive line just keeps letting down the scheme as a whole, and the whole shebang is not really designed to operate when behind the chains. It's like you mentioned, it's supposed to be NASCAR, million miles an hour, get them gas and just keep taking shots. Well, if you can't get in a rhythm, you just can never get to that part of your playbook. And I just think a better early down pass scheme needs to evolve over the next couple of weeks, or this team, while they still might make the playoff, I don't think they're going to be serious contenders unless that happens.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, to be fair to Tennessee, they want to be good this year, obviously, but the Nico year is next year. Like, next year is the Heisman campaign, is the we're full force, that. So we can always keep that between the navigational beacons. Love you bringing up Ole Miss. I was going to go to Jackson Dart next. Off to a great start. First in the SEC and PFF pass grade, 73% completion, 12.1 yards per attempt, over 2,000 yards, the only SEC quarterback to reach that number. 13 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's got an average depth of target of 11.5. Clark, are you which direction is Dart trending? Are you buying this? Are you a little worried about the competition, as you alluded to? What's his stock doing?
I've been a big believer in Dart from the beginning of the year because of how he was able to target downfield accurately last year, and that's more or less carried over this year. Sure, his last 2 games throwing deep, not what you want to see. 1 for 6 against Kentucky, the only completion being a 4th down heave when they needed to get it, and then obviously nothing else after that. This past game against South Carolina, 2 for 9 deep, and they tried deep double moves basically all game long. He was not as sharp as he needed to be. Same time, I look at his downfield accuracy stats. He is still 4th in the conference at 57%, over 10 yards downfield, being on target. So that's a little different from just being a catchable ball within someone's pass radius. An accurate pass for me is perfectly placed without an unnecessary adjustment from your pass catcher. So even though that it is still kind of weighted down a little bit from those early games, and when looking at his overall net adjusted passing yards per attempt, or his NE, as I'd like to say, it's still number 1 in the conference. It's not Jalen Monroe. It's still Jackson Dart at 12.4. So he very much is an offensive executive. But I do believe he does have next level ability. It's just those same concerns with Nico. It's like, okay, how much of the heavy lifting is the scheme doing, and how much is it of your own playmaking ability? So while I do believe in his ability to extend, win occasionally with his legs, one of the things that really did pop originally when he was transferring from USC to Ole Miss was a strong lower body. And of course, a big narrative this offseason was he's gritty. He's going to run with his shoulders over his toes and look to bowl defensive backs over when he has the opportunity. He's not going to shy away from hit. And I love that in a quarterback. But accuracy precedes everything else. And the last couple of weeks, just seeing that downfield accuracy sour a little bit, has me more of a hold than a buy and a sell, because at this point in time, he's still an impact 5-star for us at on 3. But because of the downfield souring, he's allowed Shadur Sanders to overtake him. So I don't like to do that. I'm an SEC honk, whatever you want to call me. I like to put a little bit more weight in those meaty leagues with all these great talented players around them, because it's obviously harder. The degree of difficulty is higher, so you get a better projection of what someone's going to be at the next level. But just because of how things are kind of trending in the wrong way, it's more of a hold than a sell. But if you wanted to sell high on Jackson Dart, you might as well, because the hard part of their schedule is about to pick up.
Okay, hot take time. In 5 years, who's more likely to be, so not at any point, I'm saying 5 years from right now, who's more likely to be a starter of an NFL team, Jackson Dart or Nico Iamaleava?
Nico, just because of, I believe his arm strength and athleticism are better. Dart, while, he's not a pushover by any means, he's not a nibbler, he's not a check down Charlie. It's just that he doesn't have a wow arm. As we saw some of this the last couple of weeks, where things are just a beat underthrown, and you could say maybe he's a little banged up, sure, but that never was his game. He's never been labeled as a strong arm quarterback. While Nico, I just think he has traits where you can just drop him into any given situation and have a better threshold for success than what Dart is. Again, that's nothing against Dart. I don't give out impact 5-stars to anybody. It's a hard vetted process, but I just think that the ceiling and the floor are just better with Nico 5 years from now, especially because you got to remember, Dart is one of the more older guys in college. He should be thriving right now, and he's seen a whole lot of football. Not the same case for Nico.
Yep, absolutely. And there's certainly the youth, like there's unrealized snaps of Nico's that have a potentially higher ceiling than like we've seen Dart. We know what Dart is more or less with all of that. Let's move over to Alabama and Jalen Milroe. I think this is an interesting to when we think about stock, because you go, I don't know many players that have had the roller coaster of media perception of absolutely dropping bombs on Georgia at the start of the game to, getting kind of maligned about a Vanderbilt game where a tipped pick six and a fumble otherwise, like he kind of was still awesome and maybe arguably played better against Vanderbilt than he did against Georgia, which obviously he should have overall. Is Jalen Milroe, where's his stock in your mind? I won't lead with the question. I'll just ask you, where's his stock?
You're buying the stock. Come on now. He's still on the Heisman short list. Talk about a toolsy guy. I mean, he arguably has one of the strongest arms in this class. Again, it's not a super strong arm class, but I mean, he throws some ropes. There's one to Jeremy Bernard, along the right sideline against Vanderbilt. I'm like, gosh, talk about next level throws. That certainly was one of them. And he's playing a lot better within structure this year. He's playing faster. Now, there was an off-season concern. Well, was it the center or was it him for these cadence issues, these untimed snaps where whether he wasn't ready for it or the center was just snapping it kind of roguely? And of course, with Seth McLaughlin not there to blame anymore, it's interesting to see that he is a little bit more sturdy in that structure. Of course, Kalen DeBoer, he has a very good track record whipping his quarterbacks into shape and getting them to play within structure a lot more soundly. He still does take sacks. He still does some buffer stuff that you don't want to see, but compared to where he was last year, I'm very pleased in his development. He's wasting less passes. He's been more consistent throwing down at all areas of the field, really. Of course, that is one of the big selling points of him is his verticality. Last year, Parker, he set a record in my charting system for having the highest percentage of yards come on throws beyond 20 yards downfield than anyone else. So it's like basically 40%. That's unheard of. And, that's not really subsiding because against Vanderbilt, 52% of Alabama's yards came on our good old all verts concept. So they are consistently throwing downfield and trying to use that vertical passing structure to generate big plays. And of course, when you have a special person like Ryan Williams, you might as well lean into those splash plays as opposed to the rinky-dinky 12 long sustainable drive type of aspects. So just consistently
it comes down to
it allows you to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes down to, football is easy. Just have Jalen Milroe throw it to Ryan Williams and score touchdowns, right? Like that's all you need to do. I believe last year I was affectionately calling that offense the dink and bomb. And this year I think we're just dropping the dink, dude. I think they're just running the bomb offense and they're absolutely slinging it. Obviously, game state against Vanderbilt, they were really trying to say like, all right, F this, we need to make something happen here. But yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I think Milroe is kind of, there's always going to be too much focus on him, but I think he's set up really nicely in that DeBoer offense and is a buy candidate as well. Looking at our time, I want to keep this snappy because I know you and I could go 2.5 hours on quarterbacks, and I cannot do that today. Let's go. We'll hit Ewers with a little bit deeper, and then we'll rapid fire on a couple to round us out here. So I want to talk about Arch, but we know Ewers is coming back. I feel like that's more relevant for this. Maybe Arch is an offseason conversation, but Quinn Ewers with the injury makes his stock a little bit uncertain. He's hadn't played in a couple weeks. He's coming to this Oklahoma game against an Oklahoma defense that did frustrate Tennessee's offense all around. Where is Quinn Ewers' stock? What are you doing with him?
Well, Quinn Ewers, he was another Impact 5-star earlier this year, but he had major red flags in his Impact profile. So what do I mean by that? Well, over the summer, I charted basically the top 40-ish, 50-ish returning passers against their 6 hardest opponents, trying to cut out the fat and just really see what they are against their heightened competition. Well, for back-to-back Impact studies, when he wasn't using play action, when he wasn't using RPOs, when he was just asked to operate with inside clean pockets, all of his ball placement metrics finished below the Impact standard for the second straight year. That's alarm bells going off. So that's accuracy, uncatchable, adjusted completion percentage, and interceptable pass rate. All 4 of those suckers finished below the average. Obviously, he's not been tested a whole lot. Against Michigan, he may have had 1 or 2 nice throws. Everything else was just taking what the defense presented, and he took it. So he's yet to really address those concerns in my eyes. Obviously, the upside is there. He is billed as a strong arm quarterback, but he operates more finessey. He's a touch-driven passer. So some of that has caused some of his accuracy to not be as great, just trying to get the ball delivered in a catchable manner. I would say, though, buy just because of his play caller. Shark is one of the best in my mind. Obviously, that doesn't mean anything. A lot of people can say he's one of the best play callers in college football, but it's just by how he can mirror things, make certain things present as other things to the defense, and just capture with these excellent complementary pass patterns. So skipper thumb, hitchhiker thumb, it's a bend back corner route to become a sail pattern, which is a strong side flood. And of course, the other core concept, which that plays of, is Y cross, standard air raid pattern. All of that is featured within that scheme off of power play actions. It's a lot of motions. It's a lot of schemey stuff to facilitate things for him. So while I do love his talent, I just cannot deny the fact that his environment just it's the better selling point at this point in time than he as an individual at the next level.
Yeah, so I'd say like buy leaning hold on or hold leaning buy, I guess, for Quinn Ewers there, because the system is favorable. I think the argument for Ewers from a long sense, if we zoom out just from, is he going to be college good? Obviously he's college good. What is he, 21? And this is his 4th year in college football, 3rd year of starting. Like nothing beats live reps for development, and he has so many of those and has a very favorable system. I think the ceiling is still very, very high for Ewers, even this season, to ramp up and be healthy and kind of get into the meat of their schedule and compete for a national title, but then also to potentially go in the NFL draft and try to compete for a starting spot. I think that's still very much on the table for him. Similar thoughts that I have, but definitely a different profile. Garrett Nussmeier. I'm gonna spoil this. I'm buying on Nussmeier. I think he's got the juice. I think he's made a couple of unforced errors in untimely situations, but I do think that he has undeniable juice and is a passer that is really, really intriguing to me. Not only as developing down the stretch here, but as an NFL guy. Where's your stock on Nussmeier? I hope you're about to wreck my world.
Talk about bad take Brooks. So 2 springs ago, I called for him to start over Jaden Daniels. So I do like his ability. And look, he's a 6'2".
I asked about the position. I was there with you. I asked about the position change for Jaden Daniels. I think we both talked about that. Yeah, I can hand up. I was wrong. Absolutely.
But like Nuss is a 6'2" dude, but when you watch him play, like I fool myself all the time. I think he's like 6'4", 6'5", the way he operates. Strong arm passer. And while he does have a below average uncatchable pass rate, when you're looking at his throws, his downfield throws, again, that's over 10 yards downfield, second best accuracy percentage within the SEC entering this week. Clear buy for me. I mean, and this is a guy, while he is taking some what the defense has given him, they have done a little bit more influx and easy RPO completions the last couple of games. They still want to take the top off of defenses when they can. And if Chris Hilton ever does rejoin that offense and give them that extra speed element to help Lacey and CJ Daniels win their own matchups, I think his explosivity is going to be all the more better. I mean, even just looking at his net passing yards per attempt, it's still one of the better ones in the conference. So I really do like myself some Garrett Nussmeier without question.
PFF has him fifth in passing grade of qualified quarterbacks behind Arch Manning. Sixth, sorry, and just in front of Quinn Ewers. So kind of nice. We'll keep going and keep it snappy. Taylon Green at Arkansas having a fine season. Bobby Petrino does help there. Where are we at on his stock?
Oh my gosh. Long term, I still like him. I'm not ready to give off on him yet. Now, talk about a dude who gives off Josh Allen vibes. This guy's a 6'6", and look how he moves. He races sacks arguably better than anyone else in college football. Now, some people want to throw him under the bus and say that's why his own design. I would say no, it's not. It's him bursting away from people or just straight up making the miss. Now, he can hold the ball a little too long on occasion, but that's not usually the large source of his erasures of his scramble. So, tools wise, not a concern. It's just like with a lot of these toolsy fellows, can you be a consistent passer within structure and accuracy, uncatchable balls, throwing the ball occasionally too much into harm's way are the things that undercut him. But because I'm not sure the extent of that lower body injury that he suffered against Tennessee, I'm going to say it's a sell for this year. Long term, I love it. Long term, I love it. I just don't think this year he's going to be as good as he needs to be for the Arkansas Razorbacks to be the best version of themselves. If that answers your question.
Makes a lot of sense. Definitely, if you had, the Gamer Plus statistic, he definitely has that, but that injury does throw a wrench of things. I also am inclined to believe that holding onto the ball a little too long is very, very coachable and very malleable. I think about Kyron Drones at Virginia Tech this season, where even within games, you can tell they've buttoned it up too much. And at halftime, they're kind of like, okay, actually, like you can run some, it's going to be okay. And they're finding that you see how fluid that is, not even to say anything about his quality, but how fluid that is in game. So that if that's your biggest flaw as a quarterback, I'm actually really optimistic about the ability to catch it, conditional on him having the abilities to throw the ball downfield.
Yeah, I mean, we just mentioned Jalen Monroe. That was one of the areas that was a big knock on him. Same with Shadur Sanders. I mean, these are coachable things. It's all about being comfortable, getting those reps, getting your eyes, your head, your arm all aligned to the same thing. But look, only two people have a worse adjusted net passing yards per attempt at this point in time than Taylon Green. One guy lost his job, and the other guy might not be a long-term solution himself in Lenore Sellers, who is another toolsy guy who struggles with consistency, inexperienced, raw himself. But yeah, Arnold is the other guy with a lower adjusted net passing yards per attempt in the SEC. That is
okay. I was going to leave Sellers and Arnold out of it. I think Sellers is very fun, but yeah, it seems like that South Carolina should be better. You're like, if you tell me just blind, like I don't know it's Lenore Sellers. You're like, hey, I have a quarterback with these physical skills. He can run the ball. He's very fun. And I have Nick freaking Harbor outside that he can throw the ball to. And I have a defensive pass rush that is just an abomination. I'm like, oh, I think they should be a better team. And for whatever reason, it's not clicking and doesn't look like it's going to. So Sellers and Arnold, I assumed were both sells. I want to give you space to talk about the Brock Vandegrift experiment and specifically, and then longer, can we talk about, is Kentucky going to play quarterback roulette forever? Is that like just that's what they're going to do with the transfer portal?
I hope not, but Cutter Boley, he's a 4-star local kid from Owensboro. He transferred to play his last 2 years at LCA in Lexington, where I live. So I got to see him up close in person a couple of times. But the staff is very high on him. So hopefully they can finally nail a recruit quarterback, because like you just kind of hinted at, last 4, 5, 6 quarterbacks have all been transfers, starting with Steven Johnson, who was a JUCO, and he arguably had the best career of all these Stoops quarterbacks. So it's not a great list here. But Brock Vandagriff, former 5-star, he has a little bit of a hitch in his delivery that has worried me since I've seen extended action of him. Of course, he was kind of hidden on the bench behind Stetson Bennett and Carson Beck the last few years at Georgia. This is his time to shine. So basically how he throws, you kind of want an up-out type of action, very quick. His is kind of like side to side, and you get a little bit of a strain here in your pec muscle before coming back across your body like that. It just adds a little bit of an extra beat. And if you watch some of these games early in the year, well, that allowed the defense to jump in front of passes or just straight up disrupt stuff, or have him hold on to the ball or be in the act of throwing and the ball gets knocked out of his hands, which is a major concern. I do believe, let me double check here, Parker. I do believe his turnover-worthy play rate is still the worst in the conference, so that's never really a great thing. Got lots of columns on my site, as you know. Actually, you know who has the worst in the conference right now? This is a major surprise. Beck. Woo,
interesting.
Boy. That is interesting. That is interesting.
Yeah,
But Brock Vandagriff, yeah, like his downfield stuff it's just okay. I don't know if that's going to be enough for UK to get where they want to go. He still has an extra year of eligibility. So while the optimistic crowd were like, yeah, he's going to be one and done, he very well could come back. And I do think that would help Kentucky's aspirations long term, because the first weeks of the season, they haven't necessarily maximized getting the fastest player in college football, Barian Brown, the ball in successful ways. They originally tried to use him as like kind of a designed rusher. That stuff didn't work. They have tried to use him more as a gadget. That kind of hasn't worked. They haven't really asked him to stretch the field a whole lot. Dane Key has basically taken over that role for the most part. So while Barian Brown had that deep win against Ole Miss, against the Sale concept, the only concept Kentucky has repped over a 50% success rate at this point in time. That's the stuff you know when you just bleed blue. You kind of have to know the in or outs of the operation here. But Vandagriff just gives me a whole lot of pause. And while he very much could improve with more reps, I just don't think his upside is going to be in a top 5 range within this conference, either this year or next. He's just going to be just okay. So unfortunately, I think I'm going to have to sell Big Blue Brock for our little game here.
Makes sense. Even though his vibes have been immaculate, just with the cowboy hat and the camo and everything, you love to see it.
And the red hair, I'm sure, because you gotta give some props to your ginger.
A kindred spirit, absolutely. Yeah. You brought up Carson Beck there. Let's do that. Here's my theory on Beck as we kind of rapid fire through these last couple quarterbacks. I think college football's worst kept secret was that like Stetson Bennett wasn't great and it didn't matter. Like he just had to do enough to get Georgia's offense to be amazing. And I think people over-indexed on that and then said, oh, Carson Beck, though, he's the young guy. He's amazing. And they kind of overcorrected and kind of put the cart before the horse with Carson Beck. That's not to say that he's bad. I think he's a fine passer, but I do think his ceiling is much lower than perhaps he was given this offseason, just because I do think there's some kind of overcorrection there. What are your thoughts on Carson Beck?
I'm going to throw out a name, and let's see what this does to you. Jared Goff.
Okay.
Doesn't he remind you of Jared Goff? A dude who's pretty sound within structure, but when pressure and adversity comes, he's not the same guy. So the big concern with him coming in, he was shit against pressure last year. The thing was, he just wasn't pressured a whole lot. And then the other part was, he pressed a little too much. When you're taking away just true drawback passes, like his interceptable pass rate was well into the danger zone, especially in our impact study, when you're taking away like the Vanderbilts of the world from his profile. But the thing that sold me on him was just his ability to deal within structure. His downfield accuracy was the top returning one in the conference. His floor was phenomenal, besides the interceptable stuff, was really great. So you kind of mentioned that being set up for success because of his environment. I don't think a whole lot of people know, besides the super spread offenses within this conference, only they had a higher lower true drop back pass makeup. So what does that mean? That's a high degree of play action screens and RPOs than Georgia's quarterback. So Georgia definitely tries to hide their quarterbacks, especially on early downs. And they're doing even more new stuff. So swing embeds are a design, a concept that is growing across all levels of football. So what it does, it takes a 4-man surface. So that's 4 eligible pass catchers to one side of the center. And you're making a 3-man pass concept embedded with a swing screen. So you're getting a play side blocker. Running back is running a little swing screen, and you're able to run stuff like spot, stick, sail, cross, a lot of basic 3-man concepts, but you get that little bit of an extra juice there. Well, they do enjoy that type of stuff, just getting him easy peasy wins. So what has he been doing? Obviously, Alabama game was not pretty. Even when he was getting some downfield completions, he was throwing some lollipops, some underthrown balls, some back shoulder, just, hey, go down, it's Jamar Chase is down there somewhere. Well, like, I wouldn't say Georgia has one of those receivers, but he was playing that way clearly in the fourth quarter. They called Alberts like 8 times in that quarter alone, like 6 on our last drive. So just clearly winging it down there. But a consistent thing with him this year, while he still throws that accurate pass or that catchable pass, again, giving your guy an opportunity to make a catch, it might not be a perfectly placed thing, but his accuracy has just not been sharp, especially for someone who's labeled as a QB1 entering this year. You want to see him absolutely take care of business, give you no reason to hesitate on him. But again, like Saban has said earlier this year, when you force him to move or get a little bit off of his spot in the pocket, his accuracy goes down, his confidence goes down, and as we have seen across the first 6 weeks of the season, his results have also gone down. So while I still do like his long-term potential, it's hard for me to knock the Jared Goff vibes off of this guy. Yeah. And of course, this is Jared Goff who's coming off a very high payday. It's just, we always know that's the type of passer in the back of our minds we have some reservations on, being able to make plays outside of structure, erase sacks, the way the modern quarterback, or at least what scouts want out of the modern quarterback, to keep defenses on edge and potentially, using that run game, that single wing type of style, really do spread people out and win inside the tackle box like Josh Allen is able to do. And that's never going to be his style. So he's going to have to absolutely shore up that shit the last half of the season within structure.
Yep, makes a ton of sense. We'll go very, very quickly on the last couple here as we wrap up. I don't know that we need to spill a lot of ink or words on this. Brady Cook can't get the ball to Luther Burden.
Yeah, it's weird.
It just can't. I don't understand why it's not happening. I thought they weren't doing it. I thought they were holding back. I thought they were going to, have this gear, and they just can't do what they want to on offense. It's very frustrating.
Well, again, I hate to quote myself, Parker. I'm being facetious. I love quoting myself, especially when I'm right. Homeboy fell below the conference average last year in downfield accuracy and uncatchable pass rate. Well, guess what? That has also happened so far this year. So if you can't give yourself those easy explosives, it's much easier to create an explosive pass throwing 15 to 20 yards downfield than throwing a little bubble screen and letting your receiver gain like 25 after the catch. It's much easier just to be accurate downfield, and he's just not been as sharp. And while the offensive line they did not do their job this past week against Texas A&M, but it just really accentuated his shortcomings as an operator, as a passer, as a downfield threatener. But they have to do a better job of getting burn the ball, no matter what it is. So they haven't necessarily changed a whole lot of schematic stuff. And I would argue some of the things that helped save Eli Drinkwitz's job a couple of years ago was featuring his legs in quarterback draw designs. They were one of the front runners in this conference, making that I would say, a more visible look in the past few years. That is a very noticeable growing trend. That's kind of gone away from their offense. So just like how every RPO is designed to help either buttress easy completions or just get manageable wins inside the tackle box, I'm kind of concerned why they've gone away from that. Sure, some of that could be they don't like the situation behind Cook, and they want to keep him healthy. But yeah, they just have to try and find better ways to give Luther Burden the ball, because, Theo Weeks is fine, but as we've seen, defenses are just fine trying to – if he beats us, that's fine. So they've done a fantastic job taking away Burden. But if Cook was sharper as a downfield thrower, I don't think we would having this conversation to this magnitude. It's more of a frustrating coming to Jesus type of moment. It's like, he is who we thought he was, as opposed of holding out hope, thinking he could maybe take the next step as a passer. I just don't think he has that in him.
And I think he's better than, for instance, a Garrett Green at West Virginia, but I think I lump them in as, kind of a caution to fans of like, hey, there's not another logical step here. Like, this just doesn't come out of thin air. This growth doesn't have, it's not like, and I was the world's most Max Duggan truther. And I swear that was not just fandom and getting it right. Like, that was legitimately, hey, this guy has it. This guy can be a good college starter on a very competitive team. And I think that's true of Brady Cook, for instance, and Garrett Green has been, up and down in all that situation, but saying you've got to have those underlying fundamentals to say, hey, he can get to that next level. And it feels like with Brady Cook, we're seeing, you're right. There is no kind of next step there. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. We're going to do a part 2 of this and get to the very bottom of the SEC. Let's get in the marginalia. Before we go, though, I will say, guy that I was on this summer, I was interested in a Heisman flyer on Connor Wegman. I was interested in Texas A&M as a playoff team. I thought the vision with Colin Klein was going to be there. You look at his season numbers, they're not great, 62% completion, but you throw out the Notre Dame game, which is convenient, but still, you throw out the Notre Dame game, 78.6% against McNeese, fine, whatever, 81 versus Missouri. I feel like on Saturday, we saw the very best version of what Connor Wegman can be. Where are you going with his stock?
He's a nibbler. I don't like him long term. He does not have a strong arm. He's a back shoulder artist. I had concerns about him even when he was a freshman. Like, everything was towards the middle of the field. And why is that? Because he doesn't have a strong arm to drive it outside the numbers. And as we saw, he can win contested back shoulders on occasion, but that's a timing thing. That's a trust thing. That's a chemistry thing. That's not always going to be with him when he leaves. Even think of the first back shoulder he threw. He tried to do a turkey hole shot, a cover 2 turkey hole shot that should have been picked off. 2 plays later, he did another one on third down, an underthrow with this guy behind the coverage. Just lead him downfield as a touchdown, but he has to make a crazy adjustment to make that play. Bottom 5 downfield accuracy within the SEC entering this next week. So while I didn't think Marcel Reed was the answer for them. Talk about a guy who was a pretty scattershot throwing downfield. But at the same time, Colin Klein really didn't change the offense with Wegman back, with one exception. And that one exception was featuring more RPOs, providing more easy structural wins on early down. So he is his best self within structure. Obviously, coming into this year, he was not tested at all. Basically, everyone he played finished outside the top 35 in defense, and half of his opponents last year finished in the bottom 5 in EPA per pass, according to your lovely, lovely site. So as we saw when the adversity struck in week 1, oh gosh, it looked ugly. That offensive line still is a major concern, and it's one of the reasons why I thought Missouri was going to handle them this past weekend. They allowed a bottom 5 pressure rate, 30% in the conference. He himself had a 0.3 adjusted net passing yards when pressured. That's not what you like to see. But when you consistently look at him within structure when he's not pressured, he's checking boxes. And I think someone is going to fall for that fool's gold at the next level. But I'm just not in love with his arm talent as an individual, even though he's a nice cerebral passer. He's a nice nuanced passer, but I think they can only get you so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a ton of sense. And there's definitely a conversation about college good versus, the next level. And Colin Klein does help a lot with college good, as we've seen with multiple quarterbacks kind of in history. All right, we've got to wrap it there. I'm up against the time crunch here. Clark, this is so great. Glad we're taking some of these conversations out of the DMs. We'll definitely do a part 2 and get into, we didn't even talk about Mississippi State. We didn't really talk about Jackson Arnold. Like, we can get to all that stuff, and we'll get to some of that stuff as we do. People can find you on Twitter at SEC_Statcat. Where you are posting,
because I talk a lot of shit.
I would not search that on Twitter, and I would, and they can find your website and your On3 work there as well. I'm Parker. You can find me at Stats War. We'll be back and talk again at some point in the future. I'm going to go ahead and hit the end on the stream. Clark, thanks for talking, man.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. It's always a pleasure to connect.